Good evening, everybody. Welcome to a special episode of the Monday Night Tiger Cast. Hope everyone's doing well. As you can see, the panel is shortened substantially. We're a few men down tonight. So CB's got a cricket gig on. Tiggs is recovering from concussion. Brock had an earache, and I think EJ's stuck up with his boss somewhere in a motel trying to schmooze him for a pay rise or something. I think he was doing, but that's all right. The lads have got to do what they've got to do. Welcome, Connor and Min. Hope you're both doing well. But as everyone can see, we do have a very special guest with us tonight. Played a total of 262 games for 170 goals, and 169 of those were with the Tigers. For the number 17, Paul Broderick, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
No worries at all. And before we start, a special shout out to Nick for organising this. Much appreciated, mate. Thank you for your work in connecting Paul to the show. We really appreciate it. Min, I haven't got any background noise here. Unless it's my headset that's awfully loud, potentially. That or my kids crying, one of the two. But anyway, that's all good. Thanks for your time tonight, Paul. You were recruited from Fitzroy in the country zone. For those of us who aren't kind of aware or familiar with how the country zones worked back then, how did that all kind of take place in terms of getting recruited to an AFL side?
So I'm originally from Camperdown down in the Western District. So on your way to Warrnambool, I suppose, not far from Colac. And Camperdown, Terang and Warrnambool back in the times used to be Fitzroy's regional-based area that they could tap into possible young people coming through football pathways. And back then I was lucky enough that David Parkin who was senior coach at Fitzroy at the time, and Arthur Wilson, who was the footy manager, I think, recruiter, a few hats he wore, was looking out and decided to come down and have a chat with me and the family and said, we'd like to possibly get you down to Fitzroy. So I was 17 at the time, finishing year 12, and signed up with them, but basically stayed in Camperdown for that 12-month period just to finish off year 12. And I think I went down and played maybe one or two reserve games, maybe just as a bit of a feeler. And then the following year, went down to Melbourne, which was for a country lad, that was a big change. And billeted it out with a family who supported Fitzroy, but and lived with them in East Doncaster for probably 2 or 3 years initially, just to get familiar with Melbourne and just how to get around. And, and then I was every weekend commuting back to Camperdown pretty much, just to catch up with family. And my girlfriend, Charlene, was down there at the time. And and it took me a little while probably to acclimatise to Melbourne. And then slowly, bit by bit, I started to probably stay in Melbourne on weekends at times. And Charlene would come down and, we'd sort of slowly acclimatise to the Melbourne lifestyle. So...
Gee, it's a lot of hard work, isn't it? It's a lot of sacrifices, I suppose, you have to make early days as well, especially with the schooling as well. Was that tricky to juggle the schooling component as well?
Yeah, it was. I mean, my aspirations was to hopefully get an opportunity to play VFL back then, and lucky enough, Fitzroy were keen. So that was I didn't have that worry about that side of it for 12 months, and I was able to focus on year 12. But I still got distracted. My footy was a main thing I was trying to work at, even locally, trying to play senior footy down at Camperdown at the time. And I probably could have put a little bit more time into my education space. But at the end of the day, I was lucky enough to get down to Melbourne then, and I came back from a camp from a junior under 17 sort of model. And the boys there, some were from Melbourne and some were regionally based, but and some were interstate lads. But I just realised then the level of their fitness and their maturity of their bodies and other things just were a little bit above where I was probably at the time. And I came home and basically within 3 days I was gone to Melbourne. So Mum and Dad, that was a big thing to try and cope with at the time. And my girlfriend Charlene, to suddenly I've come back and then in 3 days I've packed up and gone to Melbourne. But I just realised it was time to go. It was time to make that shift and get out amongst the next level of training and the support staff around, and just trying to then, give myself an opportunity to keep developing.
And what was it like walking into Fitzroy as an 18-year-old? Do you remember much about your first day at the club? Because it was Parkin that was coach at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was lucky enough. Parko was coaching that first year I was down there, and there was some people like Leon Harris, who was a Mortlake lad. He was originally up my Western District way. There was Matty Rendell. You had Paul Roos and Gary Pert and Richard Osborne, who probably Roosie and Purdy was becoming that sort of next tier superstar status in the AFL competition. And, we had John Blakey, who's now up in, Sydney Swans as an assistant coach to John Longmire, and now he's back in at North Melbourne, I think, Blake's at the moment. So we had a lot of, good players coming through the Fitzroy group. And then decided then a few years later to head over to the Tigers.
And so you made your debut for Fitzroy round 12 against Essendon, finished with 11 disposals and 1 goal. Do you have any special memories from your first game? How were the nerves?
Nerves were like any debut, I suppose. You got that mixture of emotions where you're really scared, but you're also excited, about the first time you're able to put the gear on and get out amongst a crowd out at Waverley it was. And I remember it was a shocking day. It was wet as anything out there, and I reckon I kicked the goal off the ground from the goal square, so socket it through. And then I remember I got dropped the next week. So that was my first introduction to VFL footy. So it was exciting, but also then a realisation that still had a little bit further to keep developing before.
It's stiff, isn't it, to get dropped the next week after that? Gosh.
Yeah, I think we got pumped that day. So.
You mentioned a few of the players you played alongside at Fitzroy, but after spending 6 years there, who were some of the best players that you played with while being there?
I think Roosie was, one of the pinnacle players. Alistair Lynch was coming through at that point in time, and then Lynchy moved to Brisbane, at the end of '93, and was really probably their pinnacle player up there with the Brisbane and trying to promote footy as a brand in Queensland. Gary Pert was an amazing player. Purdy, for those who remember him, played a hell of a lot at full back, but he was a fierce competitor. I reckon in today's footy, Purdy could have been an on-ball ruck, a big ball in the middle, and he had qualities that I reckon at times we didn't see because he was stuck in the back half. I reckon he was really creative and influential player and a really good leader amongst the group. And then you had Richard Osborne, really talented footballer, and played as a sort of a smallish forward. I suppose, like he was 6 foot, but played tall and could play small, but quite amazing. And he was a full forward when you had others like Lockett and that who were good sized blokes at 6 foot 34 and really strong men. So Ozzy was an incredible player as well. So.
Now, you mentioned 1993. There's a little bit to unpack with this move because reading it today kind of blew my mind how this all came together. But you were traded to the Tigers in one of what still seems to be the most extraordinary moves that the club's ever done, trading out Jeff Hogg, our full forward and captain at the time, for yourself, Michael Gale and Matthew Dundas. How did it all come about? Was it something a long time in the making? Like, there must have been some trigger points along the way, I suppose, to get 3 people on board to complete that kind of transaction.
Yeah, well, Richmond, I barracked for Richmond as a young bloke, and they'd always sort of been around the edges. They couldn't recruit me from Fitzroy zone because you weren't allowed to tap into players from other clubs' recruitment areas, but they'd sort of kept an interest in me and just reached out every now and then to touch base. And lo and behold, around end of 92, they were starting to get a bit more serious about it and interested in whether I might be willing to come across to the Tigers. The swap was meant to be me for Lambie, so it was meant to be a straight swap for Craig Lambert, and Hoggy was going to go for Michael Gale and Matty Dundas. And then sort of with my understanding of it, roughly an hour to go, Lambie said, "No, I don't want to move. I don't want to go to Fitzroy. I'd rather go in, I think, at that time to the draft, maybe, possibly process and take his luck that way." But he was adamant not wanting to go to Richmond. And I think the powers to be at Richmond met with the Fitzroy crew, and through some persuasive discussions, I was thrown in as another addition to that sort of Hoggy transfer across to Fitzroy. So it ended up me, Michael Gale and Matty Dundas for Hoggy as a 3-way swap, so for one bloke. So pretty incredible now you think about it back now. Really, Richmond were lucky. Fitzroy could have called my bluff. If they had said, "Sorry, we're not going to trade you," I would have had to stay because
Yeah.
I was still in contract, I think, or I couldn't really find another way to go elsewhere. It was only through this process that would have allowed me to move. So,
Wow.
but it ended up, it went through, and the rest is history. So,
Like, trying to comprehend a deal like that happening today, the only place I can fathom that happening is on a video game where you can just rig the deal to suit whatever you want to do. It's amazing that it got through. But do you remember the moment when you officially got told that, yep, it's all done, over the line, you got there?
yeah, I think it was maybe a 12 o'clock deadline that it had to be in, or a 2. I can't remember exactly the timeline, but like the trade deals today, I suppose there was a cutoff period, and it came through, not long after that the Richmond crew advised that, you're now a Tiger, and the deal had been done. So it was an unusual time, I suppose, because I wasn't sure it was going to happen, and then suddenly it did, and then the reality hit that I was going to be moving to another club in the near future.
And then with that move, how long from when you found out that, yes, it's all been approved, to your first day at the club? Is it a week? Is it a couple of weeks?
Geez, I can't remember, Chris, exactly. I think it happened fairly quickly because I think it was during the off period of one season to the next. So I think it literally within a week or two, potentially I was down at Tigerland doing the first pre-season training from memory, but it might have been a fraction more gap in there. I can't really remember now. So,
and is it different walking into a new club as a player with almost 100 games under your belt compared to your first time in as an 18-year-old at Fitzroy?
Yeah, it was still nerve-wracking. I was lucky probably that Butch was there, Mick and Matty Dundas, who I'd played, a few years with together as a group. So that eased that introduction. I actually used to work with Chris Naish at AMP Society, and I was Fitzroy, Naish was Richmond. So I got to sort of meet Naish early days and build a bit of a connection with him, which made it, again, a bit easier for me coming into a new environment. Look, I was very lucky. The Tigers also, at that period of time, had some imports from South Australia. So Jamie Tate come over, Matty Rogers had come into the club as a younger recruit to the Greg Dyer had come over from Hawthorn. I think Mark Neal had come in from Geelong potentially, and then you had younger guys coming in with as Cambo and Nida, and you had Stewie Maxfield. Tice was so there was a Chris Bond was there, established, sort of making his name in the club, and you had Scotty Turners and those guys. So it was a really, the probably biggest thing that hit me was they were young. We were young as a group, and probably me, I reckon, Deary and Neildy were the only 3 blokes married. So it was a very single based boyfriend girlfriend. Some guys were just single environment. So that was a bit different because Fitzroy was very much. A lot of the guys were married or had partners for a period of time. So it probably took a little bit of time socially to get to sort of find where you sat in that. But the guys are very welcoming, and, like any club environment, once you get in there, you make connections with different blokes straight away. So.
And what about John Norther? He was the coach at the time. How did he compare to, I suppose, someone like David Parkin as your first coach?
So Swooper Parko was very much hard on your sleeve. You're a very passionate man, quite a good tactician. Really got, I thought, a fair amount out of his playing group, and the boys played for Parko. Then John was very similar, I think, in the sense that we felt really connected as a group, and I thought John moulded that. And John was very good at trying to get the maximum he could out of all the playing group, whether you were your top pick player or you're right through to your sort of 35th, 36th, 40 player. Blokes would come in and play their role, and they were able to play a really good brand of football. And I think we were able to get some good years there in the 90s, 95 and 90, 94. We started to build a bit, and just because it was quite a unique group, bringing in probably guys who were already established there, Benny, Gale and Cambo and the rest, and Nida, and then suddenly this new group come in, and we were able to create something of a connection with each other that was pretty strong at the time. I think 95, then we made the the prelim and got done by the Catters out at Waverley. But I don't know. That's the closest I've felt to maybe what a premiership could feel like. There was just something about the group that I think that year we'd won games that probably people thought we got up on the last 5 minutes of games and come from behind. And there was just something in us that I don't think we're the most talented group, but we certainly there was something there that allowed us to win games that possibly others wouldn't have got over the line. So, but we never know then, because then we finished up. John moved on at the end of that year, and then we probably didn't get the chance to sort of see exactly how far we could go as a group. Sort of
did that move from John, did that really rattle the playing group, given that you just kind of said what you were building on? Did that really sort of throw a cat amongst the pigeons for the following year?
I think so. I think because suddenly with a new coach, like I've had 7 coaches over 14 years at the AFL level, so it's every 2 years, basically, a new coach comes in. Any player, it doesn't matter whether you're established or not, you got to resell yourself. You've got to refine where you fit in that environment. Does your style of footy complement what this new coach is wanting to the playing group to operate at? Because each coach has their own style and strategy about how they want the playing group to function. And so I think it just creates disjointedness, and it's hard to you can sort of see why with Dimmer now, 10 years in the role, that the group, started to build, and you could see why maybe that settled environment finally showed through with the Tigers, winning those 3 over the 4-year period. So I think that it's no coincidence that there was a secure, stable environment at the top, and that right through Peggy and Benny and the rest of the team that played the role. But I think that's important, that it filters through and everyone's singing from the same hymn, I suppose. Everyone's working towards that one goal, and happy to be in each other's environments. So
100%. Yeah, plays a huge part in being a successful side, no doubt. The 94 season, you had a cracking season personally. I think you were top 5 in the AFL for disposals, but then as a club, we missed out on the 8 by 6% to Collingwood. How much did that burn, and was that a big motivational factor for the 95 season, given how well we played that year?
I think so. I think any disappointment like that, where you're so close, and as a group, I think, as I said, we were building as a group, so we had unfinished business in a lot of ways, and it meant another pre-season was ticked into our playing group. So those younger guys who'd come into the club, the more established guys, it was another 4 or 5 month period over the pre-season that we collectively were motivated to keep pushing ourselves to go that next level if we could as a group. And I think that creates then also pressure on positions. So players are wanting to be the best they can. That means that there's no guarantee you're going to keep your role. So you've got to keep pushing yourself to maintain that spot. And I think we just rose as a group to another level again, and collectively everyone chipped into that sort of mentality, I suppose. So we were easily self-motivated at that time, and the group were keen and hungry to have a taste of the next stage, the finals.
The other big news for you in 94 was your selection for the Victorian state squad, and I reckon they made a blunder not getting you in the final team there. But what was it like receiving that kind of news, and was there any sort of training sessions with the entire squad or any kind of interaction? Because it's like, you read the list of players and it's unbelievable the talent of players that's in there. So what was that experience like?
Yeah, it was a great experience. I was very fortunate to be in that sort of squad, I suppose. There was some amazing players playing throughout the Vic team. Diesel Williams, who was one of the blokes I used to battle against when I was first coming to the comp, and Diesel was an amazing player. Ruzi and those sort of guys who were well-established top-end footballers, and Plugger and the rest. So there was some fair cattle getting around. Diesel had just come back from an injury, I think, and maybe played a week before or whatever, and they rushed him into the state squad to get him, if he was fit, to play. And so that probably tipped me out, I reckon, that Diesel suddenly come into the mix. That was no good for me. And rightly so. I mean, he's dominated interstate footy, and he's a quality player. So, but it was a great experience to be around them. Just to go over to Adelaide, I think we played, against South Australia over over there, and it was
I think it's like it's only a 3-point loss or something. It was a tight game, I think.
Yeah, I think we. Yeah, I can't remember. I think we did get up, did we, or was it we lost? Did we?
I'm not sure. I think it was somewhere between 3 or 5 points. But I can't remember which way it went. But
yeah, you might be
it was
right.
one for the ages.
Yeah, so no, it was a great experience. I think Curly Austin was the coach, I think, at the time. So Rod Austin, so no, it was a great experience.
And then the 95 season that we touched on earlier, we finished up third on the ladder. You've played a huge part in getting us there. What was the team morale like knowing that we'd secured third on the ladder after finishing ninth the previous year, and for a lot of you entering your first finals campaign?
Yeah, I think excitement, unknown, because you suddenly, finals footy, we wouldn't have known how we were going to cope with that environment because it was new to all of us, really. Dyer was probably the main one who'd had that premiership experience coming from Hawthorn. And I think the rest of us probably had little or no experience of playing finals footy. I can't remember if Gale might have played one series in '86 with Fitzroy, maybe, because they made the finals then. But so we're pretty raw in that area. So an unknown of whether we would cope in that bigger stage in the environment. I think we lost our first final that year, I think, from memory, to North Melbourne. And then we, lucky enough, we got to play Essendon in that game when Nida kept us in the first half with 3 goals, I reckon it was, and dominated and kept us in touching point at half time. And then I think we got a bit of momentum in the third quarter, and Daff and a few others got on the end of a few, and Nashi, and we started to get the ball rolling, and we overran them in the end. And Scotty Turner from memory cleaned up a couple. I think it was Gary O'Donnell and another bloke from memory. So
he did. I had his name written down here. Actually, not only did he clean a couple up, but he was thrown forward and kicked 2 goals.
He did. So Scotty had a really influential game, over the day, and unusual. Yeah, took the risk to throw him forward because he probably hadn't played much in the forward half over recent years. It was mainly in that backline area, and so he was obviously suited to finals footy, Scotty, because it didn't overawe him or anything, and he took on the new role and had a major impact in us getting over the line.
And then what was it like sort of after that, knowing that you'd got your first finals win under your belt? Did it just give you so much more of a boost moving forward?
I think that game we were done. So I think that was our grand final in some ways because we come from behind. I think we overran the Bombers, and I think we put so much into it that it took a fair bit out of us as a playing group.
Okay.
And come Geelong had always worried us. They seemed to match up pretty well against us as a group and had given us some hidings over the journey. So I think that bigger ground at Waverley probably didn't help us. And then, they smashed us from memory out there at Waverley, and we just couldn't go with them.
That's interesting here because often you hear fans will talk about, that was a team's grand final. That's interesting to hear that it is something that does eventuate from time to time if you've had to exert so much energy to get to a certain point that you just got nothing left.
I think so, and I think that's what I was not sure of whether if Swoop had been there in '96, could we, because we had a taste of it, we'd won one. We then experienced a prelim, which was another step up again, and probably people talk about the prelims as probably some of the premium games you get to play in outside of the granny. So I just wish we had a chance to see, was it a fluke what we did, or was there something in this group that we could have got back into that top 4 or 5 echelon and potentially had another crack at some teams that maybe we could have been fairly competitive against, and from the experiences learned how to maybe not tire come that prelim final stage, and that might be a combination of fitness, preparation, and the rest of us managing our list and everything else that comes with it. Or were we're going to be spent again because we didn't have enough talent there to keep that building stage going. But I think there was something there. We just, unfortunately, I think we missed out '96 from memory. I
think we finished 9th again.
Yeah.
That dreaded curse.
Yes.
That Geelong game, as bad as it was, I do remember being there, and the supporters that were there, as much as you might not have felt it, were all extremely grateful for the effort everyone put in. And I remember we were down getting smashed, but everyone was just singing the theme song. I thought it was such a good moment just to acknowledge how well the playing group had done to get to that point. So it was an interesting atmosphere.
It was. I mean, the Tiger faithful are very loyal. They're very, as long as you're having a crack for the gang, they don't mind. It's when they can sense that maybe we're not going that hard as we could or as focused as we should be, then sometimes the Tigers can get a little bit upset with us out there. But that day, yes. I mean, from the spin-off of the semi against Essendon, and then I think the supporters were riding that momentum too. They were really excited about making the prelim, and I think, they certainly weren't disappointed with us, but they were, we were disappointed that we couldn't quite get to the next step. But I think everyone was appreciative of the year as a whole.
100%. Definitely. And then 1996, from a personal level, was a ripper for you, winning the Jack Dyer medal, best and fairest. What was it like for you to win that kind of awards, in the prime of your career?
Amazing. Like as I said, I barracked for Richmond as a young bloke. Maurice Rioli was my sort of idol that I looked up to. He was the key centreman for the Tigers back in the 80s and late 70s, and I was lucky enough to get number 17, which obviously Jack Dyer wore as well. And that doesn't come lightly. The club bestow that, so I was very appreciative of the connection. And just from a personal point of view, that year it all come together, and it's sort of been building as you're growing and developing each year as a player. I suppose you're getting stronger in certain areas of your game, and 96 that come through, and they felt that I might have been the best one that year of the playing group, but I think Richo might have come second that year, maybe, or he was certainly up there, I think. So, and he was obviously a superstar coming through the ranks, Richo, amazing talent and amazing athleticism. He's probably one of the first I saw at that ability to, I think unique that one year he played on a wing for a period of time, and we saw him as a key forward and that mobile centre forward role, but another bloke who could probably, can dominate games and break it open with his amazing ability and athleticism. And creativity. He's quite a creative player, Richo. So, wore his heart on his sleeve, as we know, and loved. And it was, I think, when the Tigers won their first premiership and Richo was on the sideline, emotional with the whole situation. I think that typified him. He loves the club, and
definitely.
He enjoyed the moment like everyone else did in the Tiger faithful as well. So it was nice.
Yeah. You had pretty elite skills, but did you have a copper spray from Richo for missing a target?
I think he encouraged me, I think, to maybe be a little bit more accurate next time as I push forward. So
very good. Now, the chief, Brendan Gale, he's done a power of work for this club, but there's a bit of footage out there that I saw that involved the two of you that we need to ask a question about. It was round 3, 1998 versus Hawthorn. The third quarter, we're down by 30-odd points. Brendan Gale's got a set shot on about 30 to 40 metres out, 45-degree angle, and he's gone down with an enormous cramp, and he quickly rushed the ball to you to take the set shot, which you calmly slotted, and we ended up winning that game. And I think it was well noted that Brendan Gale played the rest of that game out as if he was unimpeded. Was that a strategic play to get you the ball to kind of ensure the ball went through the big sticks?
No, I don't. I think they're being generous that I was a better kick than Benny, but no, I don't know. At time, I think he legitimately was cramping, but as we know, cramps can subside. So, and I can't remember if it was on the suited a left footer coming in for that side of the ground.
Did, yeah.
So it probably was a little bit creative of Benny to try and see if we could sneak an opportunity there, and lucky enough it went through.
And it worked. We came back and got the win, so that's all that matters.
Exactly.
Now, 2001 was to be your last year. You retired into the finals campaign. When, in your mind, did retirement become a possibility for you?
I think the end of the 2000, I think, because I'd hurt myself at the end of 19, I think it was, and broke my ankle up in Sydney. And I think that next year I came back and had to, work extremely hard to get back ready to go. But it sort of there was starting to be new blood starting to come, younger groups coming in again, and talented boys that were starting to, more athletic, and they were getting faster and bigger, and it probably was just an indication that it's the game could be starting to get out of my reach because I was never big on leg speed. It was so I just felt that year or two I played a bit of more of a role where I came off the interchange and started to sort of be an impact type player, I suppose, where you might come on for your particular time period and then hopefully have an impact to give someone else a breather and then come back, recharge and come out and do that again. And I think that helped me probably get an extra year out of my body. But I think I knew 201, that was it at the start of the year. I think I just wanted to enjoy the year as a whole and try and just enjoy training. Not that sometimes you get flogged, so you don't enjoy all aspects of it. But I just wanted to probably enjoy each moment as much as I possibly could. The interstate trips, the wins, the losses, and just, because I wanted to try and go out if I could on my terms as well. So I didn't, and I think it was the right time. I think I possibly could have tried another year, but I'm not sure I would have got much out of that, and the club may not have. It mightn't have worked for both of us. I think the timing was right.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, you still had plenty of tricks in the bag. Round 4, 2001 versus Collingwood. We started the quarter with a 30-point lead, and with 7 minutes to go, the Pies have brought it back to 1 point. And then you kind of took over the next 2 minutes of the game and got it back on our terms. Do you remember that game?
Yes, I do. So I think I kicked the last two, from memory. Nearly got tackled in the goal square from Clement or someone like that.
Yeah, you did. Rory Hilton gave you a little chip kick over the top that you ran onto. And then I think Benny Gale actually had a shot that fell short, and you rove the pack and snapped a goal. So you still had it in you.
No, I was very lucky. That was on the right foot too, I think, which is unusual to go through. So, and typical Benny, he's just playing it to drop it short for me to allow me a chance to have a little crumb. So, no, it was just I suppose, a nice moment, but that popped up that year. It was nice just to still have a chance to play a role, I suppose, and be part of the group.
And I mean, part of the group we finished 4th in 2001. So, like, you talk about going out on good terms, you couldn't have kind of asked for much more in that sense. So that would have been the second finals appearance. Did it feel any different to the 95 one? I'm guessing it did, being a whole new, lot of people you're playing with this time around.
Yeah, it did. I mean, we were certainly, I felt, more ready for another finals campaign. There was a number of the boys who had tasted the first one in 95. That were now senior, well-established players. So I think that nervous side of it was less for the second time at it. We were lucky enough to make the prelim again, finished up in Queensland against Brisbane, who obviously became one of the dominant teams for the next 3 to 4 years themselves. So I think we'd reached again our ballpark for that year because I think that side we played, obviously they went on and won, but they won the next couple of years. So I think it was going to take a hell of an effort by us to get over them up there in their home turf. And I think we were hanging in there, I reckon, till halfway through the second quarter, and then I reckon their midfield got going and just in a 10-minute burst opened it up a little bit. Or it could have been the third quarter that happened maybe. And then we just couldn't bridge the gap, and they just got a bit further and further ahead of us. So that was a sad time to finish up, but also I was lucky because Alistair Lynch was a good friend of ours through the Fitzroy connection, and Lynchy was suspended that game and was sitting in the grandstand, so he was hoping they were going to win because he would have played the next week in the grand final.
Okay.
And so he was sad too that I was finishing up, but also excited that he was going to get a crack at the big one the next week. So it was mixed feelings, I suppose, that one, but lucky enough to have Charlene and the family up there, and got carried off by Dutchy and a few of the other boys, Cambo, I think, from memory, Ezra Poyaz, I think. So that was nice. And, again, I felt we'd achieved a lot that year as a group. So it was nice.
Was it nice to knock off the Blues the week prior?
It was very nice. A bit like the Bombers, I think. A couple of times there we've knocked off the traditional top 4 Melbourne-based clubs, being us, sort of Essendon, Carlton, and Collingwood. So I think the only better would have been a Collingwood, knocking them off in that capacity. But definitely the Blues. Yeah, it was nice to get them the week before and then give us a crack at Brisbane. So.
And then, so once you finished up footy, what did you do with yourself? What was your life after football?
Went and had a year off, and then went and played out at East Burwood in the Eastern competition. So I played under Doug Barwick, who was ex-Fitzroy and Collingwood, and Dougie had coached East Burwood for a couple of years and reached out and said, look, would you like to come out and play a bit of Eastern Standard footy? Divvy 1 back then it would have been, or Premier now it's called. And that was a good standard of footy. Adam Slater was out there, who was an ex-Richmond junior coming through the under-19s, and Slate's played a few senior games as well. So there was Adam White, who was an ex-Carlton player out there, and probably East Burwood was one of the stronger groups getting around Eastern footy at the time. And I think we made the granny the first year, but missed out against Noble Park, who were a very strong outfit in the competition. And then Dougie gave it away, and I stayed and coached the seniors the following year. And Matty Larkin came across as my assistant, who was Matty's ex-North Melbourne captain and player and premiership player, so I think from memory. So, Matty was great to have there as my assistant first year at it as a senior coach. And I played still while sort of Matty coached from the sidelines, I suppose. And then the year after, I sort of semi-retired, but I ended up playing 7 or 8 reserve games, I think it was from memory, just to help out. And so probably could have played another year at the seniors, but and then finished up there, and then sort of my boys were starting to come through junior footy and became maybe under 13 through to under 17 junior coach at Fitzroy Junior Footy Club. Down at the Brunswick Street Footy Ground, the old Fitzroy hub there. So it was a bit ironic. I started at Fitzroy and sort of ended up coming back to it as a junior coach.
Yeah, full circle.
Yeah, so and then the boys have then moved on and from their footy and now just watch a bit of local footy. I like just going down and having a look at the local comps, amateur footy, and my younger boy Harry's been playing with Uni Blacks in the they were in Divvy 2 last year, or B grade, and they come runner up this year, so they'll move up to A grade or Premier in Amos for 23. So and he's played a couple of senior games last year at that level, which was good for his development, and then he'll hopefully play a bit more footy there this year.
And AFL Sport's ready. I know you've been there since, I think, 2013. It's been obviously a big part of your life as well.
It has, yeah. So I've been fortunate. I come out of the footy, worked a little bit with Richmond for a few years as I transitioned out, doing a lot of the player appearance type activities, I suppose. So whether we went to the Royal Children's to visit the sick kids and families, the Richmond Family Day, where we might get the supporters down and run clinics, and we might get requests to go visit sick people or possibly people who are having special milestones of birthdays. And so that was rewarding because it was nice to get out and meet some of the fans face-to-face and catch up and just spend a bit of time together. I remember visiting a few older Richmond faithful at like a retirement house, and, just to spend half an hour with them having a yak, it means a lot. And it was something nice we could do to give back. And then moved into AFL Sports Ready, and I've been doing that now for 17 years, 18 years. We're sort of a traineeship, employment and education model, which has been very rewarding, and I've enjoyed my time there.
I actually went through AFL Sports Ready in its early days. I ended up at Memmering Secondary in Hallam, doing a placement there, and then at the Stingrays. And I can't remember for the life of me who was looking after me, but it's a pretty good program.
Peter Philandia, was it, Chris?
Or
John Allpress? John Allpress, maybe?
Yes, it was John. Yeah, it was John. So, you end up with a Cert 3 in sport and recreation out of it, and it kind of just paves the pathway for you. So it's a good program.
Yeah, it is. And you're spot on. It's just another program to give probably a lot of school leavers come into it and just give them 12 months to look at getting some good employment, basic understanding of how working environments operate, and then you do complete the qualification as part of it, and you get paid during your time. It's a stepping stone, I suppose, to see what your next pathway might look like.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's great. I encourage anyone coming out of school, even if you're unsure, just give it a crack, and you're not finding something you like.
No, you do.
Round 14, 2017, you came back as the Richmond homecoming hero. What was that like to be back out on the G in front of the Tiger Army kicking another goal?
Yeah, no, it was. I think it's a really nice touch the way the club does that. Just to get back in front of the Tiger fans, just to get back out on the MCG. It's a pretty special place, and I had Charlene and the kids with us, just to have the ability for them to be part of something like that. Whereas when I played, really Josh was very young and Lily was only just born. So, to have them to come out and share that moment with you was nice. And I think we kicked the goal from the middle of the goal square, or so we couldn't miss it pretty much, Chris. So, well, we hope we didn't. So it'd be a bit embarrassing for us. But and then you gave a ball to one of the Richmond faithful in the crowd, which was a nice touch as well. So it was good. I really like the way the club invite past players back to share a moment.
Yeah, it's good. It's just good to reminisce from not only a supporter's point of view as well, but I'm sure the players enjoy thinking back on their time at the club too. I think all the highlights are up on the scoreboard. It's just it's a good little formality to have at the start of each home game.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the other part of it too, you get to see some of the old trainers or the boot starters or the people behind the scenes that are really important to the club dynamic. And just to say good day to them again and have a laugh or a bit of a chat about things was nice as well. So very enjoyable.
Yeah, exactly. Nate, we talked about a little bit about the more recent success of the side, and you spoke about Richo's reaction to the first flag. What was your reaction like? Were you at the game?
Yes, we were, and I think definitely had a tear in the eye as well. And I think it was just such an amazing feeling for everyone involved who's been part of Richmond. The supporters, it's been such a long time for them, and to have that moment to just sit and enjoy what was happening, I think that was pretty incredible feeling. And then to see how important it meant to, it impacted a hell of a lot of people. Not, everyone who's probably been involved with the club in some capacity, I think, would have felt part of that day in some way. And I think it would have impacted all of us, I think, that moment when they got over the line. So it was you can understand how special it can be for a club to be so long not having one, and then to have a chance to get there. It's, it was an amazing feeling for everyone.
Now, before I ask the next few questions, for those watching, if you do have any questions you want to send through, I'll put a couple up at the end. So if anyone's got any questions I'd like to ask Paul, send them through. Winning one flag's hard enough to do, but did you ever think we'd go back to back and have 3 and 5 like that? That just didn't seem possible from a Richmond supporter's point of view for such a long time.
Yeah, no. Again, I think the group, just with Emma and the team, again had something special there that maybe others outside of the club didn't really understand, and they weren't finished by a long stretch. So they had the drive again and the motivation, which I think it's pretty special clubs to have that dynasty for that 3 to 4 year period. Brisbane did it. Hawthorn had done it for periods. Sydney Swans and West Coast had battled each other there for a couple of years, and then for the Tigers to get a chance to have a run at it for a while, it's pretty special, that group, what they did as a whole. So and they're not. I don't think they're far off again. Maybe having a little dabble at it in the next 12 to 18 months. So they've got some really good talent coming through, and if they can stay injury free like any club, I think it shows that you can keep your best cattle out there. You're in with a shot. So
absolutely. So what do you think would be considered a pass mark for the 2023 Tigers? Because you're right, bringing in Taranto and Hopper, a fit and fresh Dusty, it's looking pretty exciting down there at the moment. Yeah,
I think one goal would be to finish top 8, if possible, get into that top 4 level if they can. It's getting harder and harder because there's more teams I think are in with the chance of possibly pushing that area of the final series. So I think, one, to get there. Two, if they can get into that top four, it just gives you an extra week or so at it. But if not, I don't think you cannot get there for coming from fifth or sixth. I still think, because I think it's quite tight. It's getting tighter. There's not much between some of those. Maybe the top two have got a little bit extra distance between the rest, but the others, I reckon, can fall pretty close together, and it doesn't matter necessarily. So, yeah, but I hope they get there. I hope they can give themselves another chance to have a crack at it. And fingers crossed they stay fit and healthy. And
that would definitely got everything crossed. And you mentioned your son Harry before, and recently he was offered a spot on the Tigers VFL list. You must be pretty pumped to have him in the yellow and black.
Yeah, it was. It's been really nice. Harry had a couple of years of injuries, and dislocated our collarbone, so he had to get reconstructed back a couple of years ago. And last year or two, he's probably had a more chance to just have that consistency in his training and playing. And the Tigers generously offered to come down this year to do a pre-season with the VFL group, and he's loved it. He's really enjoyed the environment and just getting to understand what that next level requires from a training and physicality point of view. And then he was lucky enough to get offered to come down for a week and a half to train with the main AFL group, which over January, which he really appreciated. And again, it gave him another understanding of what the next level looks like then again at that elite level. And the boys are very welcoming and Deborah and that. And it was really good for him just to get that exposure and understanding of what it can look like. And then he'll hopefully play a few games with the VFL group this year, and he'll play between. He's got school footy still. He's at Marcelin College in year 12, so he'll probably play a bit of AGS footy, hopefully a few games in the VFL group, and then if he doesn't play between those two, he'd play back at University Blacks in the amateur comp, hopefully in their senior team. So that's sort of, he'll probably juggle around a bit this year coming into it. But yeah, just key thing is just for him to enjoy his footy and just keep developing if he can moving forward. So, yeah.
For sure. No, we'll all be keeping an eye out for him. Hopefully he goes well. At least he's got footy options. Remember, it wasn't that long ago where there was no one was playing anything, and it was just a tough time. So it's good he's got multiple outlets to play for.
Yep.
All right, we'll get into a couple of questions from some of the audience watching. This one's from Aaron. Out of the current squad, who is your favourite player?
Oh, good question. I mean, Dusty's an amazing player to watch, and I really like the way he goes about it. I think Prestia I like coming as a midfielder, and just his ball winning ability and the way he brings a lot of people into the game. Titch Edwards I thought was a very creative player, amazing sense of space and how he can put it into other players to run onto it, or he sees things a bit earlier than others. So he's quite an amazing spatial awareness type player. And then, Jack's been amazing up forward. I think, his consistency and the way he brings others into the game at times, it's a credit to him, the way he's worked. And I really enjoyed watching Dylan Grimes, and, the back half work well together, and they're really close group. And, there's some, young talented players coming through again, which I think is going to complement the core group. I like watching Kochi, because he's that in and under type player, and he brings people into the game the way he plays. So, and he gives 110%. He's not going to die wondering, so he will bust his butt to try and help the team whatever capacity he can. So
we need Koch to kick 25 goals this year, because we called out Kane Corns on Twitter about his knocking of Koch as the forward. And Kane Corns stated that if Koch kicks 25 or more, he'll do 8 laps of the 10 in a Richmond jersey. So we're on Trent Cotchin watch for 25 goals this year.
Good. Hopefully he gets there.
I know. Just feed him the ball. From CJR, Brothers, how often were you a stopper with swoop, and how often were you doing your own thing? And then who was your most respected opponent / teammate?
I think Diesel Williams was my most respected opponent that I played against, just his level of status in the game at the time, and just the way he was able to use the footy, and he's very smart footballer. and a tough player to play on, very aggressive at times, but also, a fair player as well. But he'd had that balance of both sides of his game. And then from a teammate point of view, the most respected, that's a hard one, because there's such good players in the group that we've had. I like Cambo because Wayne would he would analyse his game and then from year to year try and work at different areas to keep developing himself to be a more complete player. So he was self-driven to keep, whether that's a marking side of his game or it's his foot skills or handball or winning more footy inside or hitting the scoreboard more or whatever the role was that he felt he could keep improving. So I respected the way he went about it. And then, Nida and Chris Bond, I like Bondy, worked his backside off and, was a really good role model for others coming through. And Big Benny was, really good teammate to have around. You stood taller with Benny around you because he was such a strong competitor in the air. And, when his hands were on song, he was pretty hard to match up on, Benny, and, kicked some really crucial goals and rucked really well. He was a good ruckman to play with as well. So, which he developed probably later in his career a bit more. Yeah. And I think probably early days I was a bit of a stopper, and then I think slowly I was able to win a bit my own footy, and slowly it just naturally swapped a bit that I became a bit more of an attacking midfielder, and then opposition was slowly starting to look at me maybe to match up. But the trouble was I couldn't hit me, Cambo, Nida. The three of us couldn't be tagged or else no one was going to get the footy their end either. So they picked one of us to have a crack at, and then the other two would benefit from that because they could freewheel a bit more and, be a bit more attacking side of it. But that might change week to week depending on the opposition, who they felt might be the one to sort of shut down a bit more.
Well, it must be a good feeling when you're the one who gets off the chain, I can bet.
It's very nice, yes. You take those opportunities.
From Min, what was your favourite moment as an AFL player?
Favourite moment? I think the 95 prelim where the semi where we got over Essendon was a pretty special moment. That day we were up against it, and to come back the way we did, and just the amazing feeling once we started to get a bit the crowd, the Richmond faithful. It's hard to describe because when you're out there, it's like a dull roar because it's just a mixture of noise coming around you. But once we got going, that rose. It sort of went up a notch, and then you could feel it go again, and it sort of carries you with it. And I think that was a pretty amazing feeling in front. I think it was 85 grand of people. Like, it's a pretty special environment to have. Yeah. Your faithful, probably stronger than the other team at that time, and roaring their hearts out. So that was a nice feeling.
A controversial one from Carol. What do you think of the current stand rule?
Yeah, I don't think it's needed personally. I think it creates too much of an advantage for the possession team because you're effectively one player down. If I choose to play on, you can't really move until the umpire calls it. And as we know, the pace of the game today, you can gain a fair advantage before I can be impacting the game when the umpire calls play on. So I think it's not quite right. They could probably leave it as it was. I don't think there was much to change in that rule. I don't mind the encroaching 10-yard rule if you come, into their particular zone. That's fine because we understand that you've got to give them that opportunity to not get too close. But I think the front on one, I just don't understand how I can be on the mark and I can't jump up if you're having a set shot and you're 45 metres out, because me jumping up could mean the difference between you kicking the ball a bit higher and not making it, or me even touching the ball if you're at your distance, your range. And I think not being able to impact that is a disadvantage, too much of a disadvantage to the defensive team.
The other baffling part of that is now you can get pinged for 50 if you're running backwards away from the mark. So you're actually giving them more space and you still get penalised. It just defies logic. But
no, agree.
Another one from Aaron. We'll do a couple more. In your time playing for the Tigers, who was the one player you would always look out for in the field?
Yeah. Well, Cambo kept sniffing around me because he wanted to get, if I won it, he would always be hoping I'd handball it out to him. Him and Nida were picked that up pretty quickly. So, because I used to probably handball more than kicked at times. So they were smart enough to realise if I looked like I was going to win it, they'd get on the end of it pretty quickly. So I think those two guys probably.
And we've got last one from Nick. Timely, Nick, because you helped organise this. Did you ever get reported?
Nick might know my history with this. So I got reported 3 times. One for tripping John Barnes, where I put my leg up on an angle and sort of kicked him in the groin, I suppose, as it, sort of put your hand and leg up as he was running past. So I got reported for that, but found not guilty. I was charged with striking Barry Stoneham down in Geelong. As we were both coming off the ground, we just had some pleasantries and we were charged with hitting each other in the stomach. We both got off that one. And the final one was eye gouging, was one they hooked me up for, and that was against the Doggies, I think, from memory, and I got off that one. So no suspensions, but reported 3 times for different type of situations.
Very good. So that's what maybe equates to about 12 to 15 weeks in modern football these days, doesn't it?
Possibly, yes.
No, very good. Thanks to everyone for sending through your questions. And Paul, thank you so much for your time tonight, mate. Really appreciate it, and hearing all the stories and tales about your time at Fitzroy and the Tigers. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for the opportunity.
No worries, and big thanks to Nick again for helping organise this. Much appreciated. And until next time, guys, go Tigers.